Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the client who insulted his orchids. I had the ledger open on Wolfe's desk, trying to decide whether the gas bill was more likely to give him apoplexy than the butcher's invoice, when the knock came at the front door. Sharp, insistent, and about as polite as a cab horn in Times Square. The time was 10:15 in the morning, which meant Wolfe was with the orchids upstairs, and theoretically the world was supposed to end before anyone interrupted him between 9 and 11. Since Fritz wasn't about to abandon a pan of consommé to answer doors, that left me. I strolled down the hall, figuring it was either a delivery boy or a client who hadn't read the rules. Opening the door, I found a man dressed like he'd stepped out of a trade advertisement for silk ties. Everything about him gleamed, his shoes, his cufflinks, his hair, except his expression, which was sour as a lemon in January. "I have business with Nero Wolfe," he announced as if the name were a bell he could ring. "You and the rest of Manhattan," I told him. "But you're early. Office hours don't start until 11. He should have taken the hint. Instead, he shoved past me with the kind of entitlement that usually guarantees a short lifespan in detective fiction. I let him through, partly because I didn't feel like wrestling him into the vestibule, and partly because I was curious how far he'd get before Wolfe exploded. He didn't pause to admire the decor. Straight into the office he went, and I followed, already planning the headline. "Publisher perishes in brownstone blaze." He planted himself by Wolfe's desk, threw his silk hat down, and glared at me. "Fetch him," he ordered. I leaned on the edge of the desk. "You fetch him. He's with the orchids. That's like saying he's with God. No interruptions allowed." A click sounded from the speaking tube on the wall. Open. If Wolfe hadn't been listening already, he was now. The weeds remark must have ridden the pipe up like a telegram. The man sneered. Orchids. The most overpraised weeds in creation. I'll admit I winced. Not for me, but for him. "Brother," I said, "I'd have bet a week's salary the orchids winced louder than Wolfe just did upstairs." At that exact moment, the elevator hummed, and out he came, Wolfe in his yellow silk house jacket, black trousers, and the expression of a Roman emperor whose gladiators had just taken the afternoon off. He crossed to his chair with the dignity of a parade float, lowered himself, and fastened his eyes on the intruder. "You," Wolfe said, "have the effrontery to profane my plants." His voice had that slow, precise edge, like a knife sharpened for ritual use. The man blinked, then recovered. "If I've given offence, my apologies. I'm desperate. My name is Howard L. Granger, Granger & Company Publishers. We have a matter of life and death." Wolfe reached for a finger-sized bell cord and tugged it, not for Fritz this time, but for punctuation. "You have already earned my antipathy. Why should I compound the damage by listening?" Granger flushed, but pressed on. "Because my firm is in peril. Our latest book, The Whistling Corpse, has brought nothing but tragedy. The author dead by stroke, my partner missing without a trace, and now whispers of a manuscript that never should have existed. If the rumours spread, we're ruined." I settled back, enjoying the show. Granger looked like a man trying to sell umbrellas in a hurricane. All bluster, no shelter. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "You claim a manuscript. What is its singularity?" "Pages are missing," Granger said, "deliberately, and what remains hints at scandals involving prominent men. If it reaches the wrong hands, careers, fortunes, reputations—" "Phooey," Wolfe cut him off like a gavel. "If you wished merely to peddle melodrama, you should have remained with your typesetters." Granger bristled. "Do you not understand? Someone has already killed to keep this hidden." I tossed in. If they start on editors, the list could get long. Wolfe shot me a glare fit to wilt hydrangeas. "Archie, contain yourself." I gave him my innocent look, which he didn't buy for a second. Fritz appeared in the doorway, his Swiss face composed, and murmured, "Coffee, Mr. Wolfe?" "Not now," Wolfe said. Fritz nodded and vanished, leaving the scent of pastry in his wake. Wolfe returned his gaze to Granger. "You have insulted my orchids. You have breached my hours. You babble of curses and scandals. Why should I, sedentary, retired from futility, engage?" Granger's voice rose. Because if you don't, the police will drag your name into the mud with mine. Inspector Kramer already believes the death of our author was no stroke. He'll be here soon, sniffing. If you wait, you'll be pulled in whether you wish or not." Wolfe closed his eyes a moment, breathing like a bull preparing for a charge. When he opened them, they gleamed with cold amusement. "Mr. Granger, you came here to compel. I do not tolerate compulsion. Yet." He paused, savouring it. "You insulted my orchids. I will not abide insult. Therefore I accept your case, not for your sake, but to demonstrate that effrontery brings its own punishment." Archie Goodwin, present and accounted for, couldn't resist. "In other words, Mr. Congratulations, you just bought the most expensive lecture in Manhattan." Granger opened his mouth, closed it, and looked like a man who had swallowed his fountain pen. Wolfe leaned back, steepled his fingers. "Return tomorrow at 11. Bring every surviving page of this manuscript authentic and entire. Bring records of your partner's last movements. Bring financial ledgers, editorial notes, correspondence. Archie will draft you a receipt. If you fail in any particular, our association ends." Granger sputtered. "But the police." "Pfui." Wolfe dismissed him with a flick of fingers. "Inspector Kramer is a man of appetite, not discrimination. He will bluster, threaten, and perhaps issue subpoenas, none of which concern me." "Speak for yourself," I muttered. "I'm the one he'll throw in the cooler." Wolfe's gaze flicked toward me, unexpectedly soft beneath the frown. "He will not dare. Not while I'm here." I admit that gave me a warm spot, though I covered it by grinning. "You hear that, Granger? He doesn't say it often, but he likes me." Wolfe snorted. "I tolerate you." Granger, bewildered, gathered his hat. "I'll bring what I can, but if anything happens before then," Wolfe intoned, "you will suffer the consequence of insufficiency. Archie, show him out." I did, with pleasure. On the way to the door, Granger tried one last angle. "You'll see I'm right. There's a curse on this book. First an author, then a partner. It won't stop there." I said, "Sure. Maybe the commas will rebel next." He didn't laugh. When the door shut behind him, I leaned against it, chuckling. Back in the office, Wolfe was already dictating notes for me to type. Terse, imperious, no nonsense. He wanted a record of Granger's every claim, cross-indexed against what he expected the man would withhold. As I set to work on the typewriter, Wolfe closed his eyes again, fingers resting lightly on the chair arms. "Archie, your patience is wasted on fools. Yet," he allowed himself the faintest sigh, "we shall see." That was as close as Nero Wolfe got to admitting interest. And if I knew anything, it was this. Orchids weren't the only things in the brownstone bracing for a storm. If you ever want to measure the stamina of your telephone ear, try calling a newsroom before noon. I spent half an hour with the receiver jammed to my head, while the Gazette's switchboard girl shouted names like a bingo caller. By the time Lon Cohen's voice finally came on, my ear felt like it had been kneaded by a baker with a grudge. "Archie, this is before lunch," Lon groused. "You better not be selling me Wolfe's theories before they're baked." "Relax," I told him. "I'm just looking for a few sprinkles of gossip to season a soufflé. Your department specializes in sprinkling." "You want publishing dirt? That's half our arts page." He lowered his voice. "Granger and Comey is a ripe fruit. Their last 2 books tanked. The new one's supposed to be a hit, but rumor says somebody's gunning to pulp them permanently. Rival firms sharpening their shears." "Names, Lon," I said. "The alphabet's a big place." He rattled off 2. One outfit was an old-line house that sneered at Granger's pop trash. The other was a flashy newcomer run by a former partner with a memory like a filing cabinet and a grudge like a pit bull. "Also," Lon added, "I hear talk of a missing ledger. Editors whispering about payoffs, advances, hush money, who knows? You didn't hear it from me." "Of course not," I said. "When I quote you, it'll be as a highly unreliable source at the Gazette." He hung up on me with brotherly affection, and I scribbled notes for Wolfe's later autopsy. By 11:30, I was at a midtown bar that specialized in dim lights and beer that tasted like it had been brewed during Prohibition. Saul Pantzer was at a corner table, flat cap pulled low, sipping ginger ale like it contained state secrets. "You picked a joint with atmosphere," I said, sliding in. "The atmosphere of a used mop." Saul gave me his quiet grin. "The barkeep owes me a favor. Keeps the noise down." I ordered coffee, my ears still rang from Lon, and laid it out. Saul listened, nodded once and said, "Ledger, that's real. Word is an editor argued with Granger about it last week. Got loud enough to carry into the hallway." "Editor's name?" "Jack Ennis. Nervous type. Eats antacids like candy." That was good enough. I finished the coffee, which confirmed its resemblance to mop water, and left Saul to his ginger ale. The Gazette's newsroom smelled like ink, sweat, and overcooked ambition. I picked up a few gossip sheets lying around, headlines about Broadway, paper shortages, and which author's marriage was wobbling this week. None of it directly useful, though the way editors swarmed over their desks made me think Lon's missing ledger had already done the rounds as a cocktail whisper. By mid-afternoon, I had Ennis located in a cramped office that looked like it had been furnished out of a used furniture warehouse. He was pale, twitchy, and had the look of a man who'd spent too long proofreading other people's semicolons. "What do you want?" he snapped before I'd even introduced myself. "Sunshine, conversation, maybe a tour of your filing system. But let's start simple. Granger's ledger." His hand jerked, knocking a pile of manuscripts to the floor. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure," I said. "You and me both. But rumour says you and Granger had words over it." He licked his lips. "People talk. It was nothing." I leaned back in the chair I'd stolen. Funny thing about ledgers, they usually mean numbers, and numbers usually mean money. Unless this one recorded who borrowed Wolfe's orchid scissors, I'm guessing money's the point. Ennis flushed. "It's dangerous even to mention it. Inspector Kramer came around yesterday, asked questions. Once the police get involved," he broke off, his eyes darting toward the door like he expected it to burst open. Now, I know a red herring when I smell one. His panic might have been genuine, or it might have been an act to make me chase ghosts. But the way his fingers shredded the edge of a notepad suggested real nerves. "Relax," I said. "I'm not wearing a badge, just curious. You see, my employer enjoys puzzles, and this one smells like printer's ink with a dash of arsenic." He shook his head violently. "I can't say more. Don't ask me, don't." That was all I got. He practically shoved me out, sweating like a glass of ice water in July. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was edging on 4, which meant Wolfe was descending from the plant rooms like a monarch returning from his gardens. He settled into his chair, rang for beer, and regarded me as if I'd been caught sneaking footnotes into Shakespeare. "Well?" he demanded. I spread my notes across the desk. Lon says Granger has rivals sharpening their knives. Saul says an editor named Ennis had a shouting match with him over a ledger. Ennis himself practically swallowed his tongue when Kramer's name came up. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "And you, naturally, allowed him to dismiss you." I grinned. Only because he was vibrating so hard I was afraid he'd spill coffee on the manuscripts. Besides, I like to leave them thinking they've dodged me. It makes the second pass more fun. "Archie," Wolfe's tone could have frozen champagne. "Fun is not an element of detection." "That's where we disagree," I said. "You're in it for truth. I'm in it for sport." He sighed, reached for his beer, and took a long swallow. "Your slang, as always, is imprecise. Yet," he tapped my notes with one thick finger, "this ledger is a locus. If it exists, it binds the strands. If it does not, it is a fiction useful to our adversaries." Translation: keep digging. "Yes, but Archie," his gaze fixed me, sharp and oddly protective. "Do not allow Inspector Kramer to catch you embroidering. He is truculent enough without your inventions." "Who? Me?" I widened my eyes. "I'd never embroider. Maybe a tasteful hemline," he growled. "Bah! You will type a transcript of today's inquiries. Exact phrasing, no jocular distortions. I require precision." I pulled the typewriter closer. "Sure, editors sweat ink. I sweat trying to keep my shoes clean in their offices. But for you, boss, I'll clean up the jokes." As the keys clacked, Wolfe leaned back, eyes half shut, listening with that deceptive stillness that meant every word was being filed and cross-referenced in his personal card index of the universe. By the time Fritz appeared in the doorway to announce dinner would be at 8 sharp, the notes were done and Wolfe was frowning at the paper as if daring it to contradict him. "Archie," he said finally, "your patience with the jittery editor is commendable, but next time, press harder." "Next time," I said, "I'll bring him antacids and see if he talks as payment." That got me one of Wolfe's low harumphs, which in our line is practically affection. I filed the notes, straightened the desk, and stretched. Outside, the October sky was sinking toward dusk, and I had the feeling tomorrow was going to bring more than fresh ink to the publishing world. And Wolfe, orchids or no orchids, was already sharpening his appetite. The thing about errands is, you never know which ones are going to stay errands and which ones are going to turn into chapter headings. At 10:30 sharp, I was walking into Granger & Comey on Madison Avenue, expecting to harass a secretary for routine documents and maybe see if the firm's coffee was any better than Saul's bar. I didn't expect to find Jack Ennis, the jittery editor from yesterday's gossip trail, lying face down between two filing cabinets, arms splayed like he was hugging them goodbye. The room smelled of paper, ink, and something sharper, burned cellulose. On the floor near his hand was a fragment of manuscript, the edges blackened and curling. One inkwell had gone over, spilling across proofs and turning tidy columns into Rorschach blots. I crouched, checked the obvious. He wasn't napping. He was cold, stiffening, with that clammy dignity the dead carry whether they want it or not. The secretary screamed when she saw me, which was flattering but inconvenient. Within 15 minutes the place was crawling with blue uniforms, and right in the middle of it came Inspector Kramer, hat pulled low, cigar already raging like he'd lit it off a furnace. "Goodwin!" he barked, like I'd staged the whole thing for his amusement. "Every time I see your face, somebody's toes are up." I straightened. "Inspector, don't tell me you've been reading the obituaries under Wolfe's byline. This one was here before I arrived." He barreled closer, smoke wreathing him like an angry saint. "And you just happened to stumble in, huh? Wolfe sent you sniffing. I ought to slap a material witness tag on you right now." I gave him my blandest grin. "If you do, you'll have to buy my lunch. Ask Fritz what that costs." That didn't soothe him. Pearly Stebbins, loyal bulldog, loomed at his side. "Boss, the stiff's Ennis, editor. Neighbours say he was in early. No one saw anyone else enter." "Yeah, I can read a roster," Kramer growled. He jabbed the cigar at me. "What are you doing here?" "Routine errand," I said. "Granger wanted files delivered to Wolfe. I came to pick them up. Instead, I found your stiff. Believe me, Inspector, if I'd known the show included corpses, I'd have brought popcorn." Kramer swore, loud enough to curdle ink. He crouched over Ennis, studied the burned page fragment, then looked up. "What's this?" "Looks like part of a manuscript," I said. "Somebody didn't like the words and tried barbecue." He narrowed his eyes. "You didn't touch it?" I looked. My fingerprints are good for decoration only. I left it where it lay. One of the squad boys bagged it. Kramer straightened, his eyes drilling into me. "Wolfe's mixed up in this. Don't deny it. You don't take a stroll without his leash." "I prefer to call it employment," I said. "And if Wolfe is mixed up, he's doing it from a chair as usual. You want to search him for footprints, go ahead, but you'll need a warrant for the rug." Pearly grunted, unimpressed. "He's too smooth, boss. I say we haul him in." Kramer considered it, then shook his head. "Not yet, but Goodwin. One slip, one lie, and I'll have you in a line-up so fast you won't have time to comb your hair." "Now that would be a civic loss," I said. The phone on the secretary's desk rang. An officer answered, glanced over. "It's for Goodwin." Kramer shoved me toward it. "Go ahead. Let's see who's got you on a string." I picked it up. Wolfe's voice thundered over the line. "Archie, report." "Hello to you too. I was just telling Inspector Kramer how well you're looking these days." "Phooey. Describe." I turned slightly so Kramer couldn't lip read. "Ennis, the editor. Dead between cabinets. Inkwell overturned. Fragment of manuscript burned, bagged now. Police thick as mosquitoes." Kramer bellowed from across the room. "Tell him he's obstructing justice." "I think he heard you," I said into the receiver. Wolfe's voice lowered, slower and heavier. "Archie, do not trifle. Secure in memory every detail. You are my eyes. Was there—" He broke off, then snapped. "You have not, I trust, molested the fragment?" "Relax. I'm house-trained. I saw it, pointed it out, and watched them bag it." There was a long, bristling pause, then unexpectedly softer. "Good. Archie, you are reckless, but not a fool." I felt my ears warm, which is no way for a hard-boiled operative to admit he likes his boss's rare moments of affection. I covered it by smirking at Kramer. Wolfe continued, "Return as soon as possible. I must have your full report, verbatim. Do not indulge your levity." "You wound me," I said. "I never indulge levity. I make it work overtime." Kramer yanked the receiver from my hand. "Wolfe, if you're pulling strings on this—" But the line clicked dead. Wolfe had hung up with imperial timing. Kramer glared at me. "Tell him from me, I'll have his license yet." "He doesn't have one," I said cheerfully. "Saves paperwork." The rest was routine police grind. They took statements, prowled the office, bagged the inkwell, checked windows and doors. Every angle screamed inside job, but none of them looked good enough to wrap with a bow. Pearlie cornered me while Kramer barked orders. "What were you really doing here?" I sighed. "Honestly, Pearlie, if I tell you it was just an errand, you won't believe me. If I tell you I was hunting clues, you'll arrest me. So pick the version you like best." He scowled. "One of these days, Goodwin. Yes, I'll get mine. But until then, you'll have to put up with my grin." When they finally released me, it was pushing 2. I caught a cab back to the brownstone, rehearsing my notes. Wolfe was at his desk, a chilled glass of beer already waiting, which meant Fritz had judged the mood accurately. "Well?" Wolfe demanded. I gave him the full picture, precise as I could. He closed his eyes, hands steepled, listening. When I finished with the burned page, he opened them and growled, "Archie, you're incorrigible. You risked much by speaking freely in front of Kramer." "Sure," I said. But if the guy had died on a bed of roses, Kramer might have been cheerful. Since it was filing cabinets, he decided to snarl at me instead. It's all about decor. That got me a glare sharp enough to cut stencils. Then, grudgingly, "Still, your instinct to note the fragment was sound." "Thank you," I said. "I'll embroider that on a pillow." "Bah!" He shoved the beer toward me. "Go type a transcript, every word, now." As the typewriter clattered, I thought about Ennis. Twitchy, nervous, now silent for good. And the burned page. Somebody had decided words were dangerous enough to kill over. When I finished typing, Wolfe read it, frowned, and set it down like a challenge to fate. "Archie, we proceed." And that was ritual closure enough for me. By the time Howard Granger reappeared at the brownstone, the wrinkles in his silk suit could have been ironed out by nerves alone. The man looked like he'd spent the morning scrubbing his conscience with steel wool, which, considering one of his editors had just been found dead, wasn't far from the truth. He clutched a briefcase like it held the 10 Commandments, or at least a few juicy ones worth breaking. It was 11:50 the following day when I led him into Wolfe's office. Wolfe, planted in his oversized chair with the serenity of a mountain, barely looked up from the book in his hand. He let the silence stretch until Granger twitched like a mouse in front of a cat. "Mr. Wolfe," Granger began. Wolfe lifted one finger. "Do not." The word rolled out like a judge's gavel. "Sit." Granger sat, perching on the edge of the red leather chair as if it might collapse beneath him. I leaned against the corner of the desk, enjoying the view. Wolfe closed the book, set it aside, and fixed Granger with eyes that could have wilted ivy. "You have trespassed once already. If you intend to persist, you will first pay for the privilege. I require a retainer." Granger licked his lips. "Certainly, whatever you think reasonable." Wolfe grunted. "Archie." That was my cue. Wolfe never sullies his lips with numbers when he can stick me with the dirty work. I named a figure high enough to make Granger blanch, but not so high that he'd bolt. He did blanch, right on cue. "When Wolfe talks retainers," I said, "I get the urge to frisk him for a cash register." Wolfe swung a glare at me that could have set parchment aflame. Granger, mistaking the moment, fumbled with his checkbook and began scribbling. "Understand this," Wolfe said, voice lowering into its dangerous register. "If you withhold from me, if you prevaricate, if you embroider the truth in even the slightest stitch, our arrangement ceases. I am not indulgent to liars. Do you comprehend?" Granger nodded so hard I thought his head might dislodge. He tore out the check, passed it over, and Wolfe placed it in the drawer without a glance, as though the amount were beneath his notice, which, given his expression, it might have been. Fritz appeared in the doorway then, immaculate as always. "Lunch will be served at 1 o'clock, Mr. Wolfe," he said. His tone suggested the schedule was as binding as the law of gravity. "Very well," Wolfe replied, dismissing him with a nod. Fritz vanished. The faint scent of something braised followed him, and my stomach registered an interest. Granger tried again. "Mr. Wolfe, what I have to tell you is dangerous. If this gets out—" "It won't," Wolfe said, curt. "Proceed." Granger leaned forward, lowering his voice as though conspiracies needed the help. There exists a manuscript, not the one we published. Another, a blacklist. Names, dates, details of certain arrangements. Politicians, businessmen, authors, all compromising, all ruinous if printed. I let out a low whistle. Sounds like bedtime reading for blackmailers. He shot me a glare, but Wolfe's expression didn't budge. If anything, his eyes gleamed for the first time that morning. "Where is this manuscript?" Wolfe asked. "I don't know. That's just it. My partner, he vanished. He was the one who had access to it. Ennis knew as well. Now Ennis is dead, and I'm afraid I'll be next." "Phooey," Wolfe said, though the disdain was thinner than usual. "You are not so essential." Granger flushed. "You don't understand." "I understand all too well." Wolfe leaned forward, fingers pressing together. "This blacklist, as you call it, is the fulcrum. If it exists, men have already killed for it. If it does not, you are wasting my time with phantoms. Which is it?" Granger's voice cracked. "I swear it exists. I've seen portions, a page with initials, dates beside them, enough to topple a career or two. If the rest is out there—" Wolfe raised a palm, silencing him. "That will suffice. You have purchased my attention. Archie will take particulars." I pulled out my notebook, flipped it open. "All right, Mr. Granger. Start with the names you've seen. No embroidery. Just ink." He hesitated, then rattled off a handful of initials and cryptic references that could have pointed to anyone from a senator to a soda jerk. Halfway through, I suspected he might be puffing them up for drama, but his hands trembled too much for pure invention. "Enough," Wolfe said, cutting him short. "Archie will type this after lunch. I will consider." Granger sagged back, exhausted. Wolfe reached for his bell cord, gave it a tug. When Fritz reappeared, Wolfe intoned, "Remove our guest to the dining room. He may eat." Granger blinked. Thank you, but—" "It was not a request," Wolfe said. That ended the discussion. Fritz ushered him out gently, like a maitre d' guiding a nervous diner. When they were gone, Wolfe exhaled. "Archie, you see? Insolence compounded by desperation. He will conceal as much as he reveals." "Sure," I said. "But at least he pays in advance. That's more than some of your patrons manage." "Bah!" He closed his eyes. "You will draft a memorandum after lunch." I glanced at the clock. 12:50. "Lunch first, memos after. It's your creed." "Indeed." His eyes flicked open, sharp. "And Archie, guard that man's testimony in ink, not in memory. He is unstable." That sounded almost protective, though I didn't rub it in. Instead, I grinned. "Don't worry, I'll keep him safe. From himself, if not from the blacklist." Wolfe harumphed, which was as close as he came to approval. At 1 on the dot, Fritz returned, announcing the meal. Wolfe rose, his full 6 feet of girth and dignity, and moved toward the dining room as though led by destiny, not hunger. I filed Granger's scrawled notes, stacked my own beside the typewriter, and followed. As we sat, Wolfe lifted his napkin and intoned, "Archie, man is by nature venal. Granger's kind doubly so. We must tread with care." I poured myself water. Venal or not, at least he pays cash. Wolfe glared. "You are insufferable." I raised my glass. "But reliable, like your appetite." That earned me the silence of ritual, which meant the conversation was over until coffee, and that in this house was closure enough. If you ever want to make your day feel like a parade of human weaknesses, just line up suspects connected with a publishing house. By noon I was armed with Wolfe's list, typed, dictated, and annotated with all the tenderness of a hanging judge. Wolfe doesn't do field work, but he certainly knows how to send me into it with a marching order precise enough to shave. First on the roster was the rival editor, a tall brunette with a voice polished for radio and cheekbones sharp enough to cut bindings. I found her at a midtown cafe, sipping black coffee as though it were fuel for ambition. "Miss Avery," I said, sliding into the chair opposite before she could object. "Archie Goodwin. I collect authors, editors, and the occasional murder." She lifted an eyebrow. "Then you're in the right trade. What do you want?" "Information," I said. "Rumor says you and Granger aren't exchanging Christmas cards, and that there's a manuscript floating around that could drown half the city." Her laugh was short. "Publishing thrives on rumor. If we shut the presses every time someone whispered about a scandal, there'd be nothing left but cookbooks." Don't knock cookbooks, I told her. They've fed me more honestly than some editors I know. She didn't smile. I know nothing of a blacklist, and if one exists, it's Granger's mess, not mine. Her tone was steady, but her eyes slid sideways when I mentioned the manuscript. Whether it was guilt or just indigestion, I couldn't say. Either way, she left me with a whiff of perfume and evasion. Next on Wolfe's order sheet was the nervous author. I tracked him to a walk-up apartment on 47th, where the wallpaper peeled like last season's book jackets. He answered in a threadbare bathrobe, clutching a cigarette like it was keeping him alive. "Mr. Conklin?" I asked. "Yes," he said, jittering. "What is it?" "I'm Archie Goodwin. I'm asking about the manuscript everyone pretends doesn't exist." He flinched, almost dropping the cigarette. I don't know anything." "Sure," I said. "And I'm the Easter Bunny. You had arguments with Granger about royalties, didn't you?" "That's between us," he snapped, then sagged. "Look, I've heard of lists, but no one showed me anything. Do you think I'd be standing here if I had?" "Depends," I said. "Some people think proximity to scandal sells books. You might get a bestseller out of it." He gave a desperate laugh. "Not me. I can barely sell groceries." He shut the door fast enough to rattle the frame. So much for authors. I chalked him up as a red herring in Wolfe's inevitable lecture. After that, I made for the printer's shop on a side street that smelled of ink and sweat. The presses thundered like iron lungs keeping Gotham alive. Inside, the foreman was a slick fellow with a tie that didn't match his debts. "Goodwin," I said, catching him between presses. "Word is, you've been running jobs off the books." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Word is, you're nosy." "Both can be true," I said. "You've seen a certain manuscript, maybe made some extra copies." He froze just a fraction too long. "Never heard of it." "Printers always smell like they're cooking up words for breakfast," I told him. "Problem is, sometimes the words aren't theirs." That got a scowl. "Look, I run what I'm paid to run. If Granger wants extras, that's his concern." There it was, a slip neat as type. I tucked it away. So, there were extras. He swore and turned away, but I didn't need more. Wolfe would savour that detail like caviar. Finally, I visited the scorned partner, a man with a jaw like a clenched fist and an office furnished in second-hand dignity. He didn't waste time pretending to be happy to see me. "You're Wolfe's man," he said. "Tell him from me he can rot. Granger stole what was mine and now he's drowning in his own ink. I'll not help him." "Suit yourself," I said. "But if there's a blacklist manuscript, your name might be in it. Wouldn't you like to know before it goes public?" His eyes flickered, then hardened. "I deny it. All of it. And if you print otherwise, I'll sue." I gave him my best grin. That's the spirit. Nothing says innocence like threatening lawsuits. By the time I left him, dusk was edging the skyline, and my notebook was fat with denials, which, in this city, means I was getting close. I headed back toward the brownstone, only to find myself intercepted in the lobby by Inspector Kramer, cigar lit like a warning beacon. "Goodwin," he barked. "What the hell are you doing, stirring up witnesses? Wolfe's behind this, isn't he?" "Wolfe's behind a desk," I said. "I'm the one wearing out shoe leather." "You tell him from me," he jabbed the cigar. "If he keeps sniffing, I'll have him subpoenaed to the DA's office." "Careful, Inspector," I said. "The DA doesn't like cigar burns on his desk." He growled, but the elevator opened, and I took it before he could blow smoke rings around my neck. Upstairs, Wolfe was in his chair, eyes closed, hands steepled, the picture of composure. I laid out the notebook, gave him the rundown, Miss Avery's perfume, Conklin's jitters, the printer's slip, the partner's threats. When I finished, he opened his eyes, studied me, and finally said, "Satisfactory." That was Wolfe for applause. "Why, thank you," I said. "Coming from you, it's like a medal. I'll have it framed." He ignored me. "The printer's admission is critical. It proves multiplication. The manuscript is not singular. It breeds." "Like rabbits," I offered. "Maybe we should call in a zookeeper." "Bah! Type your notes." I turned to the typewriter, clacking out the day's haul. Wolfe sipped his beer, watching the words appear. His silence was heavy, thoughtful, and more dangerous than Kramer's bluster. When I finished, I signed it like a confession and slid it across the desk. Wolfe read it, then nodded once. "Archie," he said, voice low, "you have done well. Though your levity is part of the package, I said. He harumphed, which, in our house, was ritual closure enough. Despite yesterday's debacle, the bell went at 10:08, long and leaning, like someone determined to make a worse impression than the first. I muttered a few things that wouldn't have passed Wolfe's editorial standards and went to the door. It was Granger, our silk-suited publishing executive, only now his polish had slipped. He looked like he'd spent the night pacing instead of sleeping, and the shine on his shoes had dulled to match his face. He shoved past me without invitation, eyes darting like he expected a sniper in the foyer. "Mr. Goodwin," he blurted, "I must see Wolfe, now." "Sure," I said, shutting the door behind him. "And if you're lucky, I'll sell you a ticket to the wrath of God. Front row only." He grabbed my sleeve. "Someone followed me here. A man in a grey hat. He waited outside my building last night. Then again this morning. He's after me." "That may be," I said, "but what you're after is upstairs, and he doesn't take visitors during orchid hours. You'll find him about as receptive as the Sphinx." He didn't listen. His nerves carried him toward the elevator, which naturally I couldn't allow. Wolfe might never forgive me if I let a panicked publisher trample the orchids. I got between him and the panel. "Easy," I told him. "You don't barge into Wolfe's sanctum. You wait until he descends like Moses. That's the system." But Granger's hand shook on the button, and before I could stop him, the elevator hummed into motion. A moment later, the doors slid open and out came Wolfe, looming like a storm cloud in a canary yellow house jacket. He stopped dead when he saw Granger. His face didn't so much change expression as it acquired thunder. "Archie," he said, voice like ice, "you assured me Mr. Granger had learned." "I'd love to," I said, but the client was faster on the draw. I told him barging in meant eternal damnation. He wanted to test the theory. Wolfe's eyes bored into Granger. "You dare to invade my plant rooms. Yesterday's trespass should have instructed you," Wolfe said. "Evidently it did not." "During my hours," Granger stammered, I had no choice. Someone followed me. I had to come." "Pfui!" Wolfe advanced one ponderous step. "You chose insult. My orchids are inviolate. Their serenity is sacrosanct. You have polluted it with your clamour." I'll confess, I was enjoying myself. I'd sell tickets to Wolfe's tantrum, front row only, and retire rich. Granger wrung his hands. "Please, Mr. Wolfe, I beg your pardon, but they mean to kill me. The ledger." That got Wolfe's attention. His fury narrowed to a cold beam. "What ledger?" Granger swallowed. "The firm's ledger. It went missing weeks ago. The last time I saw it was at the International Bookmen's Charity Gala. My partner had it with him. He said it contained certain notes." "Ah," Wolfe drew a long, deliberate breath. "Archie, remove this man to the office. If he remains here another second, I shall combust." I ushered Granger to the elevator. "You see? You've got an audience with the high priest, but you've burned the temple curtain. Count yourself lucky." Back in the office, Wolfe lowered himself into his chair with the dignity of a monarch reclaiming a throne. He pressed the bell cord, and when Fritz appeared, Wolfe growled, "Beer. Cold." Fritz's eyes flicked toward Granger with a polite hint of reproach, but he nodded and vanished. Wolfe turned to the publisher. "Now, you will speak, clearly, succinctly, and if you trespass again, Mr. Granger, the penalty will not be my forbearance." Granger collapsed into the red leather chair. "The ledger vanished after that gala. My partner took it, and I never saw it again. If it contained what I think it did, notes of advances, private payments, things not in the official books, then someone would kill to keep it hidden." "Someone already has," I reminded him. "Your editor, Ennis. He wasn't rearranging filing cabinets for fun." Granger flinched. "Yes, exactly. It's begun. They'll come for me next." Wolfe sipped the beer Fritz had delivered. His anger had mellowed to disdain. "Sir, you have disrupted my peace for trivia. A ledger, a gala, a partner who hoards. Explain why this concerns me." "Because you're involved now," Granger burst out. "If I die, you'll be dragged with me. Don't you see?" Wolfe's brows drew together and his voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. "You presume too much. I allow your presence only because your effrontery intrigues me, not because you compel me." I stepped in before the tension snapped. "What he means, Granger, is that you'd better give us more than shivers if you want protection. Who had eyes on that ledger at the gala?" Granger hesitated, then said, "Several. My partner carried it openly like an accessory. Some joked about it. One rival editor, Avery, asked to see it. He refused. Later that night it was gone. Convenient, I said. And you didn't report it? How could I? If it became known, the scandal would have destroyed us. Wolfe snorted. Your cowardice is transparent, but your ledger, if real, is a thread. Archie, we must follow it. Mr. Granger, you will write for me every name who touched, saw, or mentioned that book at the gala. Dates, hours, overheard remarks. You will write now, under Archie's supervision. I handed him a pen and pad. His hand trembled as he scribbled, muttering names like confessions. I watched the ink soak into the paper and wondered which of those names would turn into funerals. When he finished, Wolfe took the sheets, scanned them, and tossed them onto the desk with disdain. Archie will type these for accuracy. You, Mr. Granger, will henceforth enter only by appointment. If you burst in again, the police will receive you as a trespasser. Am I understood? Yes, Granger whispered. Good. Leave. I walked him out, resisting the urge to pat him on the head. At the door, he gripped my arm. Goodwin, you don't believe me, do you? About being followed. I shrugged. Maybe yes, maybe no. Either way, you're making enough noise to attract shadows, even if they weren't there before. His eyes widened, and for a second I thought he'd bolt down the steps like a hunted rabbit. But he straightened his shoulders, nodded, and vanished into the street. When I returned, Wolfe had already drawn a fresh glass of beer and closed his eyes. You shouldn't have barked so hard, I said. The poor guy's wound up enough to snap. He trespassed, Wolfe murmured. I will not tolerate profanation. Sure, but you got what you wanted. The gala, the ledger. You didn't combust, and the Orchids survived. Call it a win. Wolfe cracked one eye at me. Archie, your levity is insufferable, but useful. You deflected him. You preserved my dignity. For that, I tolerate you. That's the nicest thing you've said all week, I told him. Careful, or I'll start thinking you like me. He harumphed, drained his glass, and reached for the stack of names Granger had left. That was ritual closure enough. When you've been sent to a society gala by Nero Wolfe, you don't go expecting fun. You go because he's planted you there like a flower pot with legs, and your job is to soak up gossip until the roots show. Still, I'll admit I didn't mind putting on the tux. If tuxedos came with expense accounts, I'd wear one daily. The ballroom glittered like a chandelier had exploded, and no one minded. Silk gowns swirled, violins sighed, and champagne bubbled as if prohibition had never happened. Manhattan's elite were out in force, sipping scandal with their cocktails. I threaded my way through them, the perfect blend of charming smile and detective-for-hire ears. Lon Cohen spotted me first. He was hanging around the press table, notebook tucked in his jacket like contraband. Goodwin, he said, smirking. Society page now. You'll ruin your reputation. Don't worry, I told him. I'm here strictly on assignment. Wolfe wants whispers, not waltzes. Though if a dame insists, I won't break my back refusing. You'll find plenty of whispers tonight, Lon said, lowering his voice. Rumours about that manuscript of Granger's. Someone claims they saw pages tucked in a handbag. Lady wouldn't open it, but it looked bulky enough. I filed that nugget away. Which lady? He shrugged. Plenty of handbags here, Archie. Big enough to carry a printing press. That was Lon for you. Useful, but never free of riddles. I left him to his scribbles and moved into the swirl. Miss Avery, the rival editor with cheekbones and ambition, was already holding court near the orchestra. She looked even more lethal in a silver gown, her smile practiced for headlines. I sidled up, and she greeted me with a glance sharp enough to draw blood. Goodwin, she said. What brings you here? Collecting autographs? Dancing lessons, I said. Think you could spare one? Her lips curved. Careful, I lead. We moved onto the floor, and I'll give her this. She could dance. I played my part, easy banter while steering conversation toward Granger's missing ledger and the blacklist manuscript. Publishing thrives on rumour, she said smoothly. But if you're implying I'd traffic in gossip disguised as literature, you're mistaken. Not implying, I said. Asking. Wolfe likes facts. Rumour is just the seasoning. Her eyes glinted. Then tell Wolfe the fact is this. I don't need blacklists to destroy Granger. His firm is crumbling on its own. That sounded good, but her grip tightened just enough on my shoulder when I mentioned the manuscript. Truth or red herring, Wolfe would chew on it either way. I left her with a bow and aimed for fresher quarry. That's when I found Conklin, the nervous author, cornered by a woman in scarlet satin. She had dark eyes, a laugh pitched too high, and the air of someone who collected secrets like other women collected jewellery. "Archie Goodwin," I said, introducing myself with a bow that made Conklin nearly faint with relief. She gave me a look that suggested she enjoyed fainting men. "I'm Lila Torrance," she purred. "Jack's friend." Mistress was the word hanging in the air, but no one said it. I kept my smile lazy. "Pleasure. I hear handbags are the fashion accessory of the season. You don't suppose one could carry manuscript pages, do you?" Her eyes widened a fraction, then she laughed too brightly. "What a silly thought. Who'd want to ruin a perfectly good handbag with paper?" Conklin tugged at his collar, muttering, "Lila, perhaps we should—" She silenced him with a look. "Excuse us, Mr. Goodwin. Jack promised me this dance." They swept away, leaving behind a trail of perfume and evasion. A red herring if I'd ever smelled one, though the perfume nearly covered it. The night spun on, gossip dripping like candle wax. I caught fragments, a banker muttering about advances unpaid, a critic sneering at Granger's trash novels, a secretary hinting that the blacklist named names that would blister the newspapers. Everywhere I turned, the manuscript loomed larger than the chandeliers. By midnight, my notebook was heavy with half-truths. I stepped into the smoking lounge, borrowed a telegram form from the hotel desk, and started tapping it out for Wolfe. Every phrase had to be trimmed for brevity, but I knew the boss would savor each crumb. "Miss Avery denies. Dancing good. Grip strong. Author's mistress evasive. Rumour manuscript pages in handbag. No sighting confirmed. Society buzz. Granger enemies sharpening knives." I signed it AG and handed it over, imagining Wolfe reading it with that expression of his, equal parts disdain and reluctant amusement. Back in the ballroom, the music swelled. Couples spun, laughter rose, but under it all I could feel the tension. High society wore its corruption under silk, and I was right in the middle, tucks and all, soaking it up for Wolfe. I didn't find the manuscript. I didn't even find a handbag that looked suspicious enough to frisk. But I did find more whispers than a library after dark, and for Wolfe that was nourishment enough. When I finally got back to the brownstone, it was pushing 2. Wolfe was still in his chair, eyes closed, as if he'd been waiting in silence since Orchids. I dropped my tux jacket, loosened my tie, and gave him the highlights. He listened without opening his eyes, then said, "Archie, your dancing is commendable, but irrelevant. Miss Avery's words are more valuable than her waltz." "Glad you approve," I said. "But I'll have you know, half the room admired my footwork." He opened one eye. "They admire your levity. That is not the same." "Maybe not," I said, "but it keeps me popular." "Bah!" He shut his eyes again. "Archie, type your notes, and next time, restrain your frivolities." I grinned, heading for the typewriter. "Sure, boss, but if frivolities ever win the case, I'll expect you to dance a waltz in celebration." His harumph followed me to the desk, which in our house was ritual closure enough. The call came in at 10:52, which in our line of work meant it was either the police, the morgue, or a client panicking in stereo. This time, it was all 3 rolled into one. A doorman at an uptown penthouse had found Granger's missing partner lying dead, and since Wolfe's phone number had been found scribbled in the man's desk blotter, guess who got the first invitation to the party? By 11:30, I was stepping into a marble lobby that smelled of polish and cover-ups. The elevator man looked at me as though I were already late for judgment. He whisked me to the 15th floor, where a pair of blue uniforms guarded the door like mismatched bookends. Inside, the apartment reeked of stale cigars and fresh tragedy. The body was sprawled in a wingback chair, tie loosened, eyes glassy. On the table beside him sat an empty whiskey glass and a half-written note angled for dramatic effect. The revolver lay just far enough from his hand to scream "staged" at anyone with half a brain. I walked over, bent, and studied his fingers. Ink stains, dark smudges on the tips, ground into the skin. But the suicide note was typed, not written, and the revolver showed no trace of his handling. If suicide notes came pre-stamped, this one missed the mail, I muttered. "Goodwin!" That bark belonged to Inspector Kramer, storming in with cigar already burning and temper set to boil. Pearlie Stebbins trailed him, looking eager to haul me out with the evidence. "Of course," I said. "The party's complete. Where do you want me, Inspector, on the suspect list or the catering staff?" "Don't wisecrack," Kramer snapped. He loomed over the corpse, glared at me. First Ennis, now this, and Wolfe's fingerprints are all over it. I lifted my brows. Correction, Wolfe's fingerprints are on his beer glass back at the brownstone. If you find them here, it's a forgery. Pearlie growled. You always got answers. Sure, I said. That's why Wolfe pays me. Kramer ignored the banter and jabbed his cigar toward the note. Looks clear enough. Suicide. He couldn't take the heat. Inspector, look at his fingers, I said. Ink-stained. A man who handled ledgers, sure, but not revolvers. And that note? Typed. Who types their last words? This stinks worse than your cigar. Kramer turned red enough to match the upholstery. Don't you tell me how to smell a crime scene, Goodwin. If this wasn't Wolfe's case, you wouldn't even be in here. True, I admitted, but since Wolfe is Wolfe, I am, and my nose says someone dressed this up quick. He glared harder, but I saw the hesitation. Kramer was stubborn, but he wasn't stupid. He knew I was right. Pearlie shuffled through the scattered papers on the desk. Hey, Inspector, look at this. He held up a sheaf of documents. Beneath them, half buried, was the corner of a ledger. Leather, embossed cover, gold initials on the spine. Kramer snatched it, flipped it open, swore. Damn, looks like the real thing. Why the hell's it here? Because, I said, our boy wasn't writing his own curtain call. He was silenced. Somebody wanted us to believe he took the easy way out. Instead, they slipped up and left the prop book under the pile. Kramer rounded on me. Or you slipped it in. I put my hands up. Inspector, please. I wouldn't plant a ledger if you paid me. Wolfe doesn't allow artificial additives in the evidence. That got me a death glare, but he didn't bite further. Instead, he growled at Pearlie to bag everything and stomped into the hallway to cool down. I used the lull to phone Wolfe from the partner's desk. He answered on the second ring, his voice heavy as thunderclouds. Well? He demanded. Partner's dead, I said. Stage suicide, type note, ink-stained fingers, revolver too clean, and, drumroll, the ledger was here. Embossed, genuine, tucked under papers. Kramer's growling like a bear with a toothache. Archie, Wolfe's voice sharpened, you were reckless to tamper. I didn't tamper, I cut in. I noticed. There's a difference. You are incorrigible, he thundered. Then softer, with that strange protective edge he only shows when Kramer's about to chew me up. But correct. The killer grows careless. A hasty staging reveals desperation. Glad you agree, I said, because Kramer's not convinced. He thinks we're behind the curtain. Phooey, tell him. No, do not waste words. I shall compose a letter to the district attorney if he persists. For now, you will secure a photostat of that ledger, every page, without removing the original from police custody. I will brook no impropriety. Understood. I'll sweet-talk the squad boys. Wolfe grunted. Be cautious, Archie. They will seize any excuse to involve you more deeply. Do not give them the pretext. Thanks for the vote of confidence, I said. Always nice to know you'd rather I didn't rot in the tombs. Archie! His growl softened just a fraction. I require you. Do not be foolhardy. That was Wolfe's idea of affection. I hung up, smiling. Back in the living room, Kramer had reasserted himself. He jabbed the ledger toward me. Tell Wolfe he can't have this. Chain of custody's mine. No argument, I said. But how about a photostat for our files? He barked a laugh that could have cut glass. You want me to hand Wolfe ammunition? Not a chance. Then think of it this way, I said. If Wolfe's got a copy, he'll stop pestering you every 10 minutes. Otherwise, he'll keep sending me to your office with questions. Which would you prefer? He glared, chewed his cigar, and finally grunted. You'll get a supervised copy, but if one page leaks to the Gazette, Goodwin, I'll have your hide. I'll tell Lon Cohen the paper's closed, I said. That earned me another growl, but he signalled Pearlie to arrange the photostat, which, in my book, was as good as a win. We wrapped around 1 o'clock, the crime scene sealed, the body carted off. I stepped out into the daylight, breathing fresher air than the penthouse offered. My mind ticked. 2 corpses now, both tied to Granger's empire, and a ledger too hot to handle. The killer's hand was showing, sloppy with panic. Wolfe would savour it like roast duck. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting. He'd finished lunch and sat at his desk, a fresh beer sweating beside him. I gave him the full rundown, careful with details, and laid the photostat envelope on the blotter. He opened it, flipped a page, and his eyes gleamed. Yes, payments. Names, annotations in cipher. This is the colonel. Sure, I said. Except colonels can pop. Whoever planted the suicide note wants the case closed, but leaving the ledger half buried was a mistake. Too neat. Indeed. Wolfe's voice went quiet. The killer improvises. A dangerous flaw. He will err again. Good, I said, because right now Kramer's got my name penciled in under suspect number 1. Another mistake and maybe he'll erase it. Wolfe harumphed. Inspector Kramer would not dare, not while I shield you. That warmed me more than Fritz's consommé ever could, though I kept it light. Thanks, boss. I'll embroider that on a pillow. Wolfe shields Archie. Phooey, he muttered, but he didn't hide the satisfaction. I typed my notes, crisp and exact, while Wolfe sipped his beer in silence. When the clatter of keys filled the office, the air settled again, Wolfe calm, Orchids untouched, me still breathing. And that, in this madhouse of publishing, counted as ritual closure enough. If you ask me, chasing red herrings should qualify for overtime. They're smelly, slippery, and by the time you haul one in, you discover you've been wasting your bait. Wolfe, of course, never lifts a finger for such sport. He leaves that to me. And this particular day was all about wasting shoe leather on suspects who swore innocence as if they'd rehearsed in the mirror. Every suspect swears they're innocent. Maybe we should print badges and hand them out. First up on my error-filled tour, Lila Torrance, the scarlet satin mistress I'd met at the gala. She lived in an apartment that was equal parts perfume and overdue bills. When she opened the door, she gave me a smile that promised everything and delivered nothing. "Mr. Goodwin," she purred. "Back so soon? You must have enjoyed yourself." "Sure," I said. "But this isn't a social call. I'm asking about that manuscript again. People say it might have made a pit stop in your handbag." Her laugh was syrupy. "Darling, the only things my handbag carries are powder, lipstick, and the occasional broken heart." "Broken hearts don't crinkle like pages," I told her. She leaned closer. "You want to search me?" I kept my grin in place, not without a warrant or a parachute. In the end, she gave me nothing but perfume and a headache. Her apartment held no manuscripts, no ledgers, not even a shopping list worth forging. False trail number 1. Next stop, Miss Avery, the rival editor with ambitions sharper than her cheekbones. I caught her at a cafe on Madison, sipping espresso like it was rocket fuel. "Back again, Mr. Goodwin?" she said. "You must enjoy rejection." "Only in moderation," I said. "But I hear you've got debts. Debts mean motive. Motive means I get to bother you." Her lips tightened. "I don't gamble. I don't drink. My only debt is to literature." "That's noble," I said, "but creditors don't accept poetry. And if someone offered you cash for that blacklist manuscript, you'd say no." "I'd say no," she snapped. It was too quick, too flat. But when I pressed, she deflected with talk about deadlines, editors, and the noble calling of publishing, which meant she was either telling the truth or lying so neatly Wolfe would applaud. Either way, she didn't crack. False trail number 2. By mid-afternoon, I'd logged enough walking to merit hazard pay. I ducked into a diner, ordered coffee, and phoned the brownstone. Wolfe answered after the 4th ring, his voice carrying the exact tone of a man who'd been interrupted during digestion. "Well?" he demanded. "Well," I said, "I've interviewed the author's mistress, perfume, no substance, and the rival editor, debts but no confessions, both squeaky clean unless you count smudges of mascara." "Archie," Wolfe thundered, "you squander time and strength on irrelevancies. Did you secure one verifiable fact?" "Sure," I said. "Fact, I enjoyed the company. You should try it sometime." He snorted. "Frivolity. You know my position." "Sure," I said. "Sitting." "Archie." His voice dropped into the dangerous register. "You are flippant when caution is warranted. These women may be more perilous than pistols." I smiled at the receiver. Wolfe's way of saying he worried was to insult my judgment. "Don't worry. I left my will in the desk drawer." "Phooey. Do not jest. Be precise. Transcribe every remark, no matter how trivial. I require it." Fine, I said. "I'll type it when I get back, but don't complain if half the remarks are about handbags and heartbreak." He hung up with a grunt that rattled the earpiece. I finished my coffee, considered a ginger ale chaser, and decided to get back to the grind. My last call of the day was on the printer, our slick tie and debt man. I cornered him at his shop, machines pounding in the background. You again, he said. What is it now? Just checking, I said. Rumour has it you've been running jobs off the books. Maybe a little blacklist manuscript on the side. His jaw tightened. Rumours are for hacks. I print what's ordered, nothing more. Then your creditors will be pleased, I said. You're solvent? He barked a laugh. Solvent as ink. That was no denial, but no proof either. Another dead end. By 5 o'clock I'd collected 3 suspects, 3 denials, and nothing worth Wolfe's beer. When I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair, eyes closed, the picture of serenity. I dropped my notebook on the desk. Report, he said without opening his eyes. I gave him the highlights. Lila's handbag defense, Avery's quick denial, the printer's evasions. He listened, lips tightening like clamps on a barrel. At the end, he opened one eye. Archie, this is dross. You frittered hours on titillation and tattle. Correction, I said. I worked. They frittered. And if you don't appreciate the sacrifices I make, try stepping out yourself. He sat up, eyes blazing. Archie, you go too far. Maybe, I said, but somebody has to. While you sit here pruning adjectives, I'm the one wading through perfume and ink stains. You want precision? Then dictate. For a long moment, silence stretched like a wire ready to snap. Then Wolfe exhaled. Archie, you are intemperate, yet you are necessary. Very well. You will type every word at once. I shall sift the chaff. Glad to oblige, I said, taking my seat at the typewriter. But don't complain if the chaff fills a wastebasket. The keys clattered, my notes turned into neat copy, and Wolfe's eyes half closed again, already filtering for substance. False leads or not, it was closure enough. If you've never seen Saul Panzer move, you've missed out on the city's smoothest act since Astaire. The man could walk through Times Square at noon carrying a brass tuba under his arm and nobody'd notice. So when Saul arrived at the brownstone at 9:15 in the evening, with a wrapped bundle of carbon copies tucked under his jacket, I knew he'd done it without so much as wrinkling his tie. He handed it to me in the hall with no ceremony. Printer's shop, he said, voice as flat as the cap pulled low on his head. Back room, under a crate of spoiled paper. Carbon sets, off the book's pulls. Thought you'd want, you thought right, I said, taking the book. It was thicker than expected. Onion skin carbon sets, clipped at the corner, no binding, no cover. The kind of off-the-books pulls a prudent printer hides under scrap. You didn't sign for it, did you? Saul gave me a look. You think I'd leave a receipt? Then he tipped his cap and vanished into the night, silent as punctuation. When I carried it into the office, Wolfe looked up from his chair, eyes narrowing. His bulk filled the yellow armchair like a ship in dry dock. He extended a hand without rising. The duplicates, he said simply. I laid it on the desk, and for a moment the office held the kind of silence that should have been preserved under glass. Fritz padded in with a tray and set down a chilled glass, condensation glistening like jewels. Wolfe poured the beer himself, which was noteworthy. Then, in an even rarer twist, he gestured at me. Pour. I blinked. Wolfe never lets me near his beer unless the world's ending. But I took the bottle, tipped it, and filled the glass with the kind of care usually reserved for nitroglycerin. Your trust humbles me, I said. Bah, he muttered, lifting the glass. Do not break my concentration with levity. Sorry, I said, but watching you read is like waiting for a volcano to burp. Sooner or later it's going to shake the walls. He harumphed and opened the ledger. Page after page, his eyes moved, lips pursed, nostrils flaring slightly as if the scent of ink offended him. I perched on the corner of the desk, notebook ready, giving a running commentary mostly for my own amusement. Neat columns, black ink, red corrections. Looks like a funeral program for numbers. Aha, here's something. Names in the margin. And those symbols, are they shorthand or code? Annotations, Wolfe said without looking up. Abbreviations. Each initial corresponds to an editor, an author, or a printer. The sums beside them are disbursements. Plain old accounting. His eyes snapped up. Archie, use your head. These are not ordinary disbursements. They are inducements. Payoffs. I whistled low. Blackmail? In effect. Not the vulgar sense. These are bribes, honorariums, hush money, payments to ensure favourable contracts, suppression of scandal, publication of works unworthy of print. In other words, I said, business as usual in publishing. Phooey. He turned another page. Observe here. Mr. Granger himself signed off on 2 entries, one for Conklin, the jittery author, another for Avery, the rival editor. Each payment concealed under euphemism: advance consulting fee, fraudulent, illegal. I leaned closer. So half our suspects are on the take. That's cozy. More than half, Wolfe said grimly. Look further. Payments extend to printers, reviewers, even distributors. The rot spreads. I made a note. So, the manuscript, the blacklist, the ledger, they're all connected. Somebody's paying for silence, somebody else for exposure, and people are dying to keep it buried. He grunted assent, turned another page, and let out a low sound, almost a growl. What's that? I asked. An entry marked in cipher, not mere shorthand. A deliberate code. See these alternating symbols. Asterisks, slashes, triangles. This is deliberate concealment. Which means the juicy part, I said. Any chance you can crack it before breakfast? Do not rush me, he said. This will require analysis. The clock ticked. Outside, the city hummed its nocturnal tune, taxis honking and footsteps echoing on the pavement. Inside, the only sound was the scratch of Wolfe's pencil as he copied the cipher onto a fresh sheet. I couldn't help needling him. You know, most people unwind at this hour. Dinner, a drink, maybe a little radio. Not you. You get a ledger full of payoffs and decide it's your bedtime story. His glare would have curdled milk. Archie, you trivialize. Sure, I said. It's my job, otherwise the tension would eat through the wallpaper. We went another 20 minutes with him buried in the book, and me supplying commentary he pretended not to hear. At one point Fritz returned, hovering at the doorway. Dinner is ready, Fritz said. Wolfe waved him off without lifting his eyes. Not now. I raised my brows. Skipping dinner? That's like the Statue of Liberty skipping torch duty. Dinner waits, Wolfe said. This does not. That told me the ledger was hotter than steak au poivre. Finally, Wolfe closed the book with a heavy thump. He leaned back, fingers steepled, eyes closed. The ritual was complete. Beer drained, silence observed, deductions ripening. Well, I prodded. The pattern is clear, he said. This ledger is no mere financial record. It is a register of corruption. Each payment ties a person to complicity. The cipher conceals the most damning entries, those who could not be named openly, likely figures of prominence, politicians perhaps, investors, persons whose exposure would destroy reputations. And get people killed, I added. Indeed. I flipped my notebook shut. So now we've got motive, means, and enough suspects to cast a Broadway review. What's next? Wolfe opened his eyes. Next, we proceed with caution. This book is dynamite. We must not let it slip. I grinned. Relax. I won't trade it for a round of gin rummy. He gave me a look that mixed irritation with something warmer. Archie, you jest. Yet your care is requisite. Guard it well. Which was Wolfe's way of saying he trusted me. I'd take it. The phone rang just then, slicing the silence. I picked it up. Kramer's voice growled down the line. Goodwin, tell Wolfe I know you've got copies of the ledger. Don't bother denying it. If he hides evidence, I'll have warrants before dawn. I glanced at Wolfe. He lifted a hand, motioning me to relay. Inspector, Wolfe's voice boomed when I handed him the receiver, you presume too much. The police have custody of the original. What we possess is analysis. If you wish conclusions, you may wait for them. If you wish to bluster, do so into your cigar. Kramer sputtered. Wolfe, if you obstruct... Phooey! Wolfe barked and hung up. I grinned. You know, someday that's going to land us both in the tombs. Perhaps, he said, but not tonight. He pushed the ledger toward me. Archie, type a summary. Every name, every sum, every annotation. Leave nothing omitted. Sure, I said, rolling my chair to the typewriter. But if my fingers get ink-stained, don't stage it as suicide. He ignored me, closed his eyes again and reached for the bell cord. When Fritz entered this time, Wolfe finally nodded. Now, dinner. That was closure enough for the evening. If you've never seen Inspector Kramer in full volcanic eruption, let me paint the picture. A short, wide man with a cigar clenched like a bayonet, cheeks going crimson under the strain of holding back curses, and shoes that announce every stomp across our office rug like a gavel. At 10:14 the next morning, he burst into Wolfe's office with Pearly Stebbins dogging his heels and enough fury to power the subway. "Wolfe!" he barked, and the cigar smoke puffed out like cannon fire. "I've had it up to here with your games. Where's the ledger?" I was at my desk, typing up Wolfe's notes from the night before. Not that Wolfe needs me to, since his memory is like a steel trap welded shut, but he likes the record neat. I stopped mid-sentence, suspect denies knowledge, and swiveled my chair. "Morning, Inspector. I'd offer you coffee, but Fritz doesn't brew it with nitroglycerin." That earned me a glare that could have fried bacon. Pearly just grunted. Wolfe, seated behind his desk with his bulk arranged like a throne-room statue, lifted his eyes slowly from the Gazette. "Inspector," he said, voice measured, "you are intruding." "I'll intrude till I get what I came for," Kramer snapped. "That ledger, hand it over, or I swear I'll come back with a warrant and men enough to turn this place inside out." Phooey. Wolfe flicked the paper closed and laid it aside with exaggerated calm. "You will do no such thing without cause. You have no cause. The book is property of my client, delivered into my hands for analysis. It will remain here until I conclude my investigation." Kramer's cheeks ballooned. "Client privilege doesn't cover obstruction. A man's dead, another near it, and that ledger ties half your suspects together. Don't lecture me on the law." I stood, deciding if someone didn't play referee, Wolfe's blood pressure and Kramer's cigar might both explode. "Easy, Inspector. You'll smoke us out before you serve the warrant. Sit down, have a moment, breathe. I promise Wolfe's not planning to eat the ledger for lunch." Kramer jabbed a finger at me. "You think this is funny, Goodwin? You think murder is a wisecrack?" "Sometimes, yes," I said. "Not the corpses, just the conversations." Wolfe's eyes cut to me, half a rebuke, half indulgence. "Archie." "Okay," I said, raising my hands. "I'll let the inspector boil without seasoning." Kramer circled the desk like he wanted to grab Wolfe by the lapels, except Wolfe's lapels aren't exactly designed for tugging. He planted both fists on the desk, looming as much as his frame allowed. "You think you're smarter than the whole department, that you can hide behind words and orchids while men die?" "Not hide," Wolfe said softly. His tone dropped into that dangerous register where every syllable was a knife. "Protect. If you blunder with this ledger, Inspector, you will ignite scandal that will destroy reputations and perhaps further lives. I will not hand you a torch." Kramer's jaw worked, his cigar a stub now. "Damn you, Wolfe." "Enough," Wolfe thundered, slamming a palm on the desk. "You will not damn me in my own office." The room froze. Even Pearly straightened like a schoolboy caught stealing chalk. I cleared my throat. "Gentlemen, may I remind you that Fritz has soufflé on the menu for lunch. If you both intend to flatten the place, give me time to salvage dessert." Kramer shot me another glare, but this time it lacked teeth. He turned back to Wolfe. "Listen, you and I both know that book nails Granger and the rest to the wall. If you sit on it, the killer stays loose. More people get hurt." "And if I yield it," Wolfe said coldly, "the killer escapes in the smoke of your premature charges. I require time, and you will give it to me." "You arrogant." Kramer stopped, then sucked hard on the cigar butt. He exhaled in a cloud. "All right. You've got gall, Wolfe, I'll give you that." "That," Wolfe murmured, "is the first true statement you have made this morning." I couldn't help myself. If Kramer ever smiles, the sun might quit out of respect. Wolfe's lips twitched. Kramer growled. "Fine," the inspector said. "I'll wait, but not forever. I'll be back with papers if you so much as blink wrong." He yanked the cigar from his mouth, jammed it back again, and stomped for the door. Pearly gave me a look halfway between pity and warning. Then they were gone, the door slamming behind them with enough force to shake the orchid cases upstairs. The silence left behind was thick. Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and exhaled like a bellows easing off. "That man," he said, "is intolerable." "You noticed," I said. Still, he didn't throw the desk out the window, so I'd call it progress. He opened one eye. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "You will ensure the ledger is secured in the safe. Then type 2 copies of the annotated summary, one for our use, one for contingency. If the inspector returns with a warrant, we must be prepared to reveal enough to appease him without surrendering all." I nodded. Got it. Belt and suspenders. Precisely. I locked the ledger away, then rolled back to the typewriter, feeding in fresh paper. Wolfe closed his eyes again, fingers steepled, already deep in deduction. The brownstone held its peace once more, broken only by the tapping of my keys and the faint echo of Kramer's threat still hanging in the air like cigar smoke that refused to clear. And if you ask me, that was about as close to détente as Wolfe and Kramer ever got. New York streets have a way of sounding like they're whispering secrets after midnight. Tires hissing on wet pavement, neon buzzing in broken rhythm, somebody whistling a tune they probably don't want you to recognize. That's the setting you get when you decide to tail a jittery printer with debts longer than his press runs. I'd been nursing ginger ale at a dingy cafe across from his shop until he closed up, his fedora jammed low like he thought the brim made him invisible. I caught up with him 2 blocks south, just past a bakery that was closing for the night, the smell of rye bread chasing him down the sidewalk. "Evening," I said, falling into step. "Fine weather for a confession, don't you think?" He jerked so hard the hat nearly went airborne. "Goodwin, I told you. Yeah, I know what you told me. The trouble is, words printed on cheap paper smear, so why don't you give me something in ink that doesn't run?" He glanced around, desperate. His fingers twitched like they were still reaching for movable type. "I don't know anything." "Sure," I said. "And I don't know anything about women, taxes, or why Wolfe keeps Fritz chained to a kitchen. You were running extra copies, pal. I don't mean church bulletins. I mean a manuscript, our mystery guest, the blacklist." He stopped under a street lamp, the glow carving deep lines in his face. He licked his lips. "I only did what I was told. They wanted 5 extra sheets struck, kept off the ledger. I swear I never even read what was on them." "Printer with ink on his hands who doesn't read copy," I said. "That's like a butcher who never tastes sausage. Try again." His shoulders sagged. "The editor, she wanted them, said it was insurance. If anything happened, she had proof." There it was, dropped like a lead slug into my pocket. The rival editor, glamorous, dangerous, and apparently smart enough to keep an ace tucked in her handbag. I was about to push further when the night offered a demonstration on sudden death. From the corner, a taxi lunged forward like it had sniffed overtime pay. Its headlights flared, horn blaring, engine screaming straight down on us. I yanked the printer sideways, our shoes skidding on wet stone. The cab's bumper brushed my coat, close enough to press my lapel, not close enough to collect fare. The cab never slowed. It barreled past and vanished around the corner. The printer collapsed against a lamppost, panting. They're trying to kill me." "Yeah," I said, brushing dust from my sleeve. "And they almost killed me too, which is worse. I just shined these shoes." He moaned. "I didn't mean. Save it. You're still breathing, and that means you're still useful. You're coming with me." Back at the brownstone, it was too late for Wolfe's orchid hours. Too early for beer. That meant catching him in the office, probably digesting dinner while pretending to tolerate me. I put the printer in a chair that had been the death seat for more than one nervous visitor, then dialed Wolfe upstairs. His voice came heavy and irritable. "Archie, it is 10 minutes past 11. Explain this disruption." I leaned against the desk, grinning at the printer who looked ready to faint. "Sorry, sir. I was busy saving lives, including my own. Our friendly printer admits to running extra copies of the blacklist manuscript. Claims the rival editor ordered them. Oh, and he nearly got introduced to a taxi radiator." There was a pause, long enough for me to picture Wolfe's eyes narrowing, his lips pursing, his chair creaking under the shift of his weight. "You are intact." Still standing, shoes scuffed, pride dented, but intact. "Foolishness," he rumbled. "You expose yourself to danger with the subtlety of a carnival barker. This assault is, however, confirmation. Someone grows desperate. Desperation precedes error." The printer croaked. "I told you, I don't want any part." "Silence," Wolfe commanded through the receiver, and the man wilted as though the word carried physical force. "Archie, secure his statement in writing, no embellishments. Then send him home by cab, one you call yourself, and confirm with the company. No wandering." "Got it," I said. "Though if you want him gift-wrapped, I'll need ribbon." "Archie." The name cracked like a whip, then softer. "You did well not to be struck. I expect prudence hereafter." That was Wolfe speak for I was worried. He'd never hand me flowers, but I could read the tone. "Yes, sir," I said, and hung up. I typed up the printer's shaky confession, my keys clattering through the quiet office. He signed it with a trembling hand. I locked it in the safe and rang for a cab myself. By the time the taillights carried him away, the street was quiet again, but the echo of squealing tyres stayed with me. Back inside, the brownstone seemed almost smug in its calm. The ticking clock, the faint smell of Fritz's after-dinner coffee drifting from the kitchen. I sat at my desk, loosening my tie, and muttered, "If taxis keep missing me by a bumper, Wolfe might finally let me drive the sedan." Of course, that would be the real fantasy. If suspects handed out autographs, this one would sign with lipstick. That was my thought the minute the rival editor swanned into Wolfe's office, her heels tapping like a typewriter at full gallop, and her smile a blend of bravado and perfume. She carried herself as though the fate of publishing rested on the angle of her hat brim, and maybe she wasn't wrong. Wolfe did not rise, of course. He didn't even incline his head. He was settled in his chair, a bulk of mountain draped in brown, eyes narrowed, lips pursed into a line that might have been approval in another era, maybe the Renaissance. He flicked 2 fingers at me, which was my cue to usher her into the red leather seat across from him, the same seat that has seen more nervous breakdowns than Bellevue. "I don't appreciate being dragged here," she began, her voice crisp enough to cut paper. She reached into her purse and produced a folder with a flourish. "But perhaps this will interest you. Notes, coded cross-references, proof, if you're clever enough to read it." I leaned over to take a look. Handwritten pages, neatly tabbed, with names scrawled in shorthand and arrows that suggested conspiracies. I whistled. "Looks like the minutes from a gossip columnists' union meeting. You've been busy." She shot me a glance sharp enough to split kindling. Wolfe extended one hand, palm out. I passed the folder to him like a ceremonial offering. He opened it slowly, his eyes skimming each page. Silence thickened. If suspense were oxygen, we were close to suffocation. Finally, he set the folder aside with delicate disdain, as though it had left smudges. "No," he said. The editor blinked. "No? That's all you have to say?" "That is all I must say," Wolfe replied. "These notes are fabricated. Too deliberate, too convenient. They were planted either to incriminate you, madam, or by you to incriminate another. Both possibilities offend my intelligence." I admit, I felt a pang of disappointment. "Come on, Wolfe," I said. "It's all there. Names, arrows, the works. If it quacks like a duck—" "Phooey," Wolfe's voice cracked like a gavel. "Mr. Goodwin, you persist in confusing appearance with essence. A duck may quack, but a man may also imitate it. And you are too easily charmed by superficialities." The editor bristled. "Are you accusing me of falsifying evidence?" "No," Wolfe said, folding his hands on his stomach. "I am accusing you of vanity. You wish to appear indispensable. You wish to seem the possessor of secrets. Vanity is not guilt, though it is nearly as tiresome." I grinned. "That's harsh. Even for you. You'd better be careful. She might charge extra for the insult." Wolfe ignored me, which was his way of saying I was amusing, but irrelevant. He fixed his gaze on her, unblinking. "Tell me, madam, why did you keep these notes in such a conspicuous folder? Why not a locked drawer or your own memory?" She faltered, her painted lips parting. I wanted insurance." "Precisely. Insurance is useful only if others know you possess it. You wish to be seen with these notes, which means they are not genuine insurance, but theatre." That landed. Her chin lifted, as if to reclaim ground. "You're twisting words. Those notes are real." I leaned back, arms crossed. "Lady, the last time somebody sold me fake notes, they were for a speakeasy that didn't exist. At least they came with free matches. Yours don't even light a fire." Wolfe's lips twitched, which for him counted as a belly laugh. "Mr. Goodwin has a point, though crudely expressed. Your notes, madam, are a script, not a record, and scripts are for performances." She stood, her chair scraping back. "This is an outrage. I came here voluntarily." "You came," Wolfe interrupted, "because you were summoned. Spare me the indignation. Mr. Goodwin, return her papers." I slid the folder back across the desk. She snatched it, nearly ripping the flap. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Wolfe sighed, the kind of sigh that meant he was both irritated and intrigued. "Mr. Goodwin, you favour simpler solutions. You are eager to seize what is thrust before you, but crime rarely obliges us with simplicity. False narratives abound. Our task is to strip them patiently until the truth stands bare. I spread my hands. Sure, but if the truth could wear a little lipstick, I wouldn't complain. Wolfe glared. Your levity is ill-timed. Maybe, but it keeps me sane. The editor, trembling now beneath her varnish of poise, clutched her purse. You'll regret dismissing me. Others will believe what I have. Others, Wolfe said, are welcome to squander their time. I will not. He rang the bell cord. The chime summoned Fritz, who appeared at the doorway with the solemnity of a butler announcing Judgment Day. Show this lady out, Wolfe instructed. She swept past Fritz like a storm front. Her perfume lingered longer than her outrage. When the door shut, Wolfe turned his gaze on me. Archie, note in the record, the incriminating notes are a plant devised to distract. I took my pad and scribbled. Noted. Distract who, though? Us, Kramer, or the press? Vanity, Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe murmured. The killer's weakness is vanity, not greed, not fear. Vanity compels them to strut, to mislead, to decorate their lies. Watch for the flourish. That is where they will err. I tapped my pencil. So, all I have to do is look for somebody strutting like a peacock in a bookstore war. Piece of cake. Your metaphors are execrable. And your appetite is bottomless, I shot back. But somehow Fritz keeps you fed. That got me the glare again, but not the dismissal, which meant he was secretly entertained. I leaned back, stretching. Fine, I'll play along. I'll watch for vanity. Though if you're wrong, don't blame me when Kramer barges in waving another subpoena. He will, Wolfe said calmly, but he will also leave, as always, dissatisfied. That was Wolfe's version of a bedtime story. He closed his eyes, lips pressed tight, already retreating into his thoughts. I capped my pen and shut the notebook. All right, if we're stripping false narratives, maybe Fritz could strip a chicken for sandwiches. Vanity doesn't fill my stomach. From the hall, Fritz's voice floated back, perfectly timed. Dinner will be at 8, I grinned. See, even vanity can't stop Fritz's clock. If Wolfe ever took the stage, Broadway would close shop in surrender. That was the thought humming through my head as I surveyed the line-up in our office that evening. You couldn't have asked for a more jittery, mismatched cast of characters if you'd pulled names from a hat at a Bowery flophouse. The brownstone office had seen its share of tableaus before, but this one had the crackle of a final act. Wolfe sat in his throne, not really a throne, but the oversized mahogany chair that might as well have been carved for Caesar. His bulk filled it like destiny itself, eyes half-lidded, lips pursed, fingertips grazing each other in the cathedral of his patience. The desk lamp gave his face a chiaroscuro effect. If you had a camera, you'd swear it was a still from some German expressionist reel. I took my customary position on the side, notebook handy, pen loaded, and wisecracks on deck. Kramer stood near the door, arms folded, his cigar blazing like a lighthouse in fog, broadcasting, "Don't waste my time." Pearly Stebbins loomed behind him like a bulldog straining at a leash. And then there were the suspects. The glamorous rival editor perched like she was at a society luncheon, lipstick flawless. The nervous author, who looked as if he'd traded his last night's sleep for a bottle of rye. The slick printer with ink still clinging to his fingers. And finally, Howard L. Granger. Silk suit, manicured nails, arrogance worn like a boutonniere. If confidence were armor, he thought he was bulletproof. The only problem for him was Wolfe. "Gentlemen, madam," Wolfe's voice rolled out like thunder muffled by velvet. "You have been summoned to this house not by courtesy but by necessity. Murder has twice stained your profession of letters, and the time for pretense is over." The editor flicked her cigarette, affecting boredom. "If you have accusations, Mr. Wolfe, best to spare us the theatrics." "Pfui," Wolfe's eyes snapped open. "My theatrics, madam, are less offensive than your attempts at dissimulation. You were a decoy, those same planted notes convenient and calculated to distract. I dismissed them then. I dismiss you now. You are vain, not homicidal." She bristled but stayed silent. The nervous author stammered. I told you, I had nothing to do with any ledger. I only wrote my book." And quarrelled with your editor about royalties, Wolfe cut in. You had motive for anger, not murder. Your mistress was dangled as bait, a red herring, and I declined to nibble. The author sagged with relief. My pen scratched across the page, and I leaned toward Wolfe. 2 down, boss. That leaves a printer and a publisher. Want to flip a coin, save some time? Be silent, Archie. Wolfe's eyes flickered with irritation, and, if I wasn't imagining it, the ghost of amusement. He turned to the printer. You confessed, under duress, to producing illicit copies. Cowardly, but forgivable. However, you are not the architect. You were used. The printer shifted uneasily. I didn't want trouble. You have it regardless, Wolfe said, but your trouble is not murder. Which brings us inevitably to you, Mr. Granger. His gaze fell like a hammer on the publishing executive. The room seemed to tighten. Even Kramer leaned forward, his cigar frozen mid-air. The executive smirked, a twitch of the mouth that had probably passed for charm at cocktail hours. Really, Wolfe, you think I would soil my hands? I run a company. I build reputations. Murder is beneath me. Murder, Wolfe intoned, is never beneath a man who fears ruin. You insulted my orchids, sir. A triviality to you, but to me a signal. You scorn what you do not understand. So too with lives. You believe that by removing obstacles, an editor too curious, a partner too restless, you could protect your empire. But your vanity betrayed you. Vanity compels you to strut, to overreach, to decorate your lies with flourish. The executive's eyes narrowed. You have no proof. I have duplicate sets from the printer, Wolfe replied, salvaged by Mr. Panzer. It records payments, blackmail, disguised as advances, threats cloaked as contracts. It is your hand, your scheme, and your motive. The silence was brittle. Archie's rule of tribunals, number 1, always toss a wisecrack before the tension snaps your tie. I cleared my throat. If you want me to read the ledger aloud, boss, I'll try to keep the dramatic pauses to a minimum. Kramer barked, Let's see it. Wolfe raised a hand. Inspector, you may, but you already suspect its contents. What you crave is confession, and you shall have it, not from a book, but from the man. The executive laughed, too high-pitched. This is nonsense. Those payments, business necessities. Anyone in publishing juggles favours. Wolfe leaned forward, voice like iron wrapped in silk. Business necessities do not require corpses in filing cabinets or penthouses staged as suicides. The pattern is clear. First, the editor who questioned your accounts, then the partner who threatened exposure, each silenced clumsily, hurriedly. The killer grew reckless because he feared the shadow of truth. The executive's hand twitched. His cufflink gleamed under the lamp, betraying a tremor. I noted it. If that cufflink could talk, it would plead the fifth. Kramer growled. Enough games, Wolfe. Either charge him, or I haul all of them downtown. Do so, Wolfe replied coldly, and you will mire yourself in a morass. But if you allow me— You? Kramer snapped. You're not the law. No, I am reason. Wolfe's voice filled the room. Reason dictates that the man who feared exposure most, who stood to lose his empire, who dared to insult orchids to mask his unease, is the murderer. The executive sprang to his feet. This is slander. Pearlie was quicker. He shoved him back down. Sit tight, mister. I scribbled in my notes. The scene too good not to record. For the record, I muttered. The suspect objects. Motion denied. Kramer's jaw worked around his cigar. He exhaled smoke like a dragon conceding defeat. Damn you, Wolfe, you may be right. I am. Wolfe's eyes glimmered, a faint spark of triumph. Archie. Yes, sir. Conclude. That was new. Wolfe never ceded the last word. But tonight, perhaps in acknowledgement of insults endured and truths unearthed, he passed me the baton. I shut my notebook, leaned forward, and let my grin spread. Mr. Executive, here's the short version. You tried to play publishing like a poker game, but you forgot one thing. The house always wins. And in this case, the house was Wolfe's brownstone. Bad luck for you. The executive sagged, all bravado draining like ink from a spilled bottle. Kramer barked orders. Pearlie snapped on cuffs. The suspects murmured, a mixture of relief and dread, each calculating what tomorrow's headlines would mean. As the door closed behind them, silence reclaimed the office. Wolfe exhaled, long and heavy. He reached for the bell cord. "Fritz." Our chef appeared, immaculate as ever. "Dinner will be at 8, he said, as though nothing had transpired. Wolfe nodded. "Excellent." I leaned back, stretching. Well, Orchids insulted, murders solved, reputations ruined. Just another day in paradise. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me, the faintest hint of warmth in their depths. "Archie, your levity is intolerable and indispensable." That was as close as he'd ever get to a thank you. "I'll take it."